Kosio Toichu. Dodo Kuno Khalidana Khanagiski. Oh, hello, and how are you? This is Chief Eagle Spirit Dancing of the Cherokee Blackfoot Cultural Circle. Again, I sit here before you, humbled by my listening audience, and hoping and with prayer that what I'm extending, to my brothers and sisters who are listening, there is a measure or level of understanding that is uh, um, uh, mutual in my communication, and if not, then I can only strive, to do better in imparting uh, the wisdom that I have learned, the knowledge and the wisdom that I have learned, over the years. Today's another Native American Indian commentary with regards to Indians of so-called African and indigenous or native descent, Native American descent. I have a problem with terms on both sides. One, Native American, and two, African American. Reasons why, I make myself clear. If most people don't already know, and I don't do this to gloat, but I'm what you call a well-read brother. I have been studying history for 27 years. You say, oh, wow, this guy doesn't look like he's over 30. Well, this is what I've heard. I'm not saying this off the top of my head. People have said, oh, you don't look like you're past 30 years old. I'm 45. And I've been studying history since I was practically 16, 17 years old. And that's because of the people that I were around. Um, so-called African Americans who were my foster family growing up. My adopted mother was also of Native and African descent. But it was my African American, so-called African American brother, who I received a huge education from. I mean, the level of enlightenment. There was no school that could have educated me better than my brother, who I love like my father. So with that, I wanted to expound on the issues of African American and Native American. And when I'm touching on those particular titles that has been afforded us or given us, being of both sides of the fence. I don't even want to say the two trees, if you will, not even the fence, because the fence shows division. So I'm gonna say two trees that I stem from. African to me is a misnomer because of my research, and there's some people going to get angry with me. I tell people, look, don't be upset with me, for what I'm about to say with regards to African Americans. I have brothers in my family who have mixed heritage, who look African American, more darker than me, hair texture's different than mine, and I love them. But I have to say this for people who want to attack me, which I have again been attacked. Telling me that African Americans who hate their heritage. I charge them with saying, how many books have you read? What research have you done? I have 27 years under my belt. 27 years. How many books have you read? Some Africans today don't know that the continent of Africa was renamed. That it was initially called Asia, meaning light of the world. This caused some controversy. I understand that. If you've been educated or edified in a certain way for so long, this is conflicting information because this is what I've been taught. Okay, I understand that. It's hard to uproot something that has been planted so firmly, even in its falsehoods for so long. So I tell people I'm not African American. I'm black. I'm of a lighter hue, yes, But at the root, which my grandfathers were dark skin and brown skin, whether they had coarse and woolly hair and straight hair, it doesn't matter to me. You know, it's the knowledge of who they were, which is very important. And I tell you this, they were not African American. The history of the continent has been changed by the European. And people say, how you know? Well, you have to go to Africa today, and you see the French have been in Africa, the Spanish have been in Africa, the English have been in Africa. Matter of fact, they just got the English out of South Africa. No. Let me rephrase that. The English just came out of, how should I put it, the apartheid rule in South Africa. You know, and in the 1990s when Nelson Mandela became president. But the white rule is still there because they still own the mines, the resources. So, but my whole, I don't want to get into that. My whole thing here is a title that has been given to you, and I'm going to make a correlation between Africa and America. The indigenous peoples never called themselves Americans. We never called ourselves Americans. This is not to be disrespectful towards the American government. It's just to say that we know who we were as a people. Some of us might have been divided in our respective, villages and communities and cities. Yes, I said cities. But we were not American. I said this in one of my other videos, Red Indian Myth. We went by our nation, our national identities within the Western diaspora from South and North America. If you were from the woodland tribes, you went by your tribal nation. If you're Narragansett, you were a Narragansett. You wasn't Indian. It was, white man came over here talking about you Indian. It was like, what? What's that? You Penobscot. White man said you're Indians. Huh? What is that? You go back 1,000 years in certain parts of Africa, they said you're African. The darker brothers there would have been like, what is African? And they know this. You go in some of the Muslim villages. Take for instance Alex Haley's roots, Kunta Kinte, where he Alex Haley found his family in Jufure by the Kambi-Balongo River. Those people were Muslims. They were black Muslims. They weren't African. You go there and you tell them that they were African. Before it was renamed by the European. Oh yes, I said it. It was renamed just like this continent was renamed. North America was not called North America. The Europeans came here with that, but we've accepted it. Hello, we're Native American Indians now. Okay, but how far can you go back with that? It wasn't until somewhere around the latter part of the 17th century that this country was actually named by the European after they conquered us. When was Africa conquered? Look, Africa is not a country. Big difference. It's a continent. Like North so-called America, the South and the northern parts. What made it harder for us is that we were not totally united. Because if we were I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. Our people would be in their rightful place and still ruling these lands. If we had been united, that's the lesson that we must learn. Deganawida said it when he did the sample, taking the one arrow and said, put it over your knee. It's easy to break. But you get 5 arrows and you put it over your knee, it's harder to break. So this is the lesson that most of our people, and this is what I'm going to get to later on, the reason why I'm making this commentary, because there's some people who come on, to my sites or other sites that I've visited, made some comments with regards to certain comments that have been made with other videos that I've watched, with regards to African Americans and Native Americans. People want to bring up this thing about the racism that exists, which is something that needs to be addressed. It needs to be, to expose it, and to root it out, in certain circles, because racism is a manufactured word. Where did that come from? Where did the idea of racism come from? And its form that exists today. Did the natives manufacture this? No, no. And the reason why I say that is because you see, when the natives came across the Europeans, we were like the good Samaritans. Again, we saw you hurt, destitute, we helped you. We didn't care what color you were. We helped you. And sometimes if the hospitality was so great, we were absorbed into the community. This happened with Europeans and so-called African Americans. So where did the racism come from? This was a white manufactured system. I don't care who don't like it. I know this to be, in fact, the truth, and that this is the reason why we're having a lot of problems today. Now, I discussed with an individual. He said that African Americans who are calling themselves Native Americans should be ashamed of themselves because the indigenous peoples were their enemies. And you see, when it comes to ludicrous comments such as those, knowing the history that I have studied and researched, I kindly said to the gentleman, those circles were very small, and if so, they were manufactured by Europeans, because in our communities, and how I was raised, we used to call what some Christians call Satan. We call Satan the whisperer. So whisperer meaning somebody who goes in your ear and says, "You see those people over there? They come here to rob you." And the one who's whispering in your ear is the thief. I say this because this is what the Europeans did when they came here. Some people gonna get mad at this. Oh, you're race hating. No, I'm just telling the truth. So if you want to get mad at me, that's fine. You could take your anger and your BS somewhere else, because what I'm teaching here is truth, and it's factual throughout history. This was another way that the European what they use, what you call divide and conquer tactics, because when DeSoto and the Africans and Indians in the Delta, the Calusa and the other indigenous tribes who had unified themselves against their oppressor, their enslavers, the Spanish conquistadors realized and said, "Oh my God, these Africans and Indians fighting together, it's almost an impossibility for us to overcome them. They are that much of an indomitable fighting force." So it wasn't until the English, because whenever the Africans and the indigenous peoples fought together against their European enemies, they overcame them. And this was a problem for the Europeans, so they had to take and do whatever means of action to break this up. And they used psychological warfare. Henceforth, racism was born. I have to speak about these things because there's people who are still suffering from the effects of this today, who spew things out of their mouth out of ignorance rather than in the know, because if they knew, they would not speak on that which they do not know and understand, for them to say, "Oh, well, there's Africans running around ashamed of themselves." If this is all that they were taught in their families, say, "Yeah, we have a great grandmother who was native hair down to here," okay, whether it's true or not, what's the dilemma? That they're going to learn about a native history that is almost mirror image in African tribal customs. I'm talking about our value system, how we lived with each other. The African tribal nations had similar customs. So that African, so-called African brother and sister here who doesn't have any connection because of their mothers and fathers who in their history within the South said, look, it's easier for me to teach about natives because we don't have the resources to go back home to Africa. So I might as well learn about indigenous culture and claim some part of an indigenous heritage that might be there, that might not be there, but is it good for me? Will it benefit me somehow, mentally, or spiritually, or morally? The indigenous populations never had a problem adopting people into their, if they figured it was good medicine for them. They're still adopting white folks today into tribal communities. And then once the whites are adopted, almost all of them complain, claim that they're fully adopted into the such and such tribe and recognized as one of the people. So the Africans now, the so-called Africans who are adopting the culture, are looking for some substance in their lives, some cultural similarities. Now, there are plenty of African American organizations out there that are engaged in African culture, spirituality. These people make choices for what they want to do. And I think in light of the history here and what has happened to the darker peoples, people have that right to make that choice. Now, there are some indigenous cultures. And before I go off into that direction, I just wanted to be clear by saying that Africans or African Americans who are looking to stand on something, are not looking to hurt anyone else. They're looking for an identity. Some of them with justifiable and substantive evidence of their indigenous past. Some have the evidence, whether orally or through pictures. Yes, because they did have cameras back in the 1800s. So there are some who trace their ancestry back. But you got some people running around here talking about, oh, these African, the black people, they're lying. Who you damn got some damn nerve? But yet, in some circles, when white folks claim that they're Indian, it's all right. They can be Indian. It's all right. So if you have some indigenous peoples in some circles who have incorporated so much European blood into their fold, and they want to think that this is okay, that there's no problem with that, but yet at the same token, utter from their mouths and say African Americans can't be a part of our fold. I say, the hell with you. Then you go off into the sunset, with your wannabe lookalike European selves, and see how far it gets you down the long run with their children and their children's children, when histories are being told and represented in circles. Because histories is something that is perpetual. And when those things come up with children, they say, oh, how is it that, mommy, how is it that we look different, than the rest of the Indians? Why do we look so pale? Well, because we are originally from Europe. We are not originally from here. Well, what's the relationship? How did we come up, upon being, the natives? How did we come from Europe? Well, they have to tell the truth. The Europeans came here with malicious intentions. Ain't no African come over here with no malicious intentions to come over here and do any harm. Not the majority of them. I've heard people say, oh, the Moors came over here. Yeah, some of them did come over here. And some of them did ally themselves with the Europeans. But no more so than some Indians as well have allied themselves with Europeans to do our own people harm. They said no people are ever destroyed totally from without. This usually starts from within. So our people also have part in our own destruction because of what? What Satan has offered as, okay, I give you 20 acres. This is where some of the foolish Indians who said 20 acres, you know, it's your own land anyway. So you're going to sell your brothers and sisters out for 20 acres because he offered you a house and land to kill off your brothers and sisters? This has happened. And can't be argued that it did not happen. There were some indigenous peoples individually who sold our people out. The Trail of Tears, the Ross faction, the Buddhanots, the ones who took their English white names, who called themselves, they were Cherokees, but they called themselves Indians, but yet they took their white names. They didn't take their Indian names. I call them sellouts. Some people got nerve to come around here and talk about how they still maintain their cultural identity, but yet you not only changed your name, but you did not serve the better interests of your tribal community. You served someone else to do their bidding. So, you're not going off to a tangent. You have to forgive me. I'm a little hyper this morning because of some of the comments that I read. Some people who, just said some very, very nasty things, about African Americans in particular, with regards to our identity of people who, were enslaved, and even in Africa, there was some people who were responsible for the selling of our people. It was a very, very minute amount, very small, and the practice of slaves from Africa, because they had slavery in Africa, but it wasn't like chattel slavery here in North America. Oh, people so, oh, the Africans enslaved. This is another reason why there are some African Americans who have learned this. They have said, oh, well, you know what? I'm not African, because the Africans, they sold our people into slavery. So therefore, if they find a native in their family, they immediately run to that. Only thing I say to that is, when they sold their brothers into slavery, and it was a wicked thing to do. Yes, they did it with the thought in mind that they would treat their slaves the way the Africans treated this. Slavery in Africa was closer to worker. It said it's in a movie, Amistad, but in the Library of Congress, historically, this is in fact true, that their slaves were not compared or treated like the slaves, the chattel slavery that North America treated their slaves here in North America. The brothers in Africa didn't know what they were doing, taking their names from them, brutalizing and raping their children, having mothers sleeping with their sons, and that's where the word MF comes from. Yes, mother effer. That's where that comes from, and doing all kinds of insane, committing all kinds of insane and barbarous acts against the indigenous and the Africans. Together, they did this, and they did this in order to break our spirits and then break the chain of historical truths about our histories. You see, again, I said this in some other videos. I reiterate this time and time. Ignorance is not bliss. People learn, go study, go research. Look, this is what they're afraid of. They don't want people to know. So I'm going to speak from the bottom of my heart and tell people, get up off this ignorance, man. If there are people here in North America who have taken to indigenous culture, leave them alone. That ain't a bad thing. Our culture is a beautiful culture. Indigenous culture is a beautiful culture. I'm talking about in terms of pre-colonial natives. Our minds that we have to get back. Before they got here, we must get back to that, or we're doomed as a people. So-called Native Americans, so-called African Americans. Get your mind back. Did you know, again, I'll say this again, did you know that the continent was called Asia? Asia means light of the world. Africa was not called, Africa was renamed by a Greek. His name was Scipius Africanus. I've researched this. People running around here. Africa, just like North America, again, I reiterate, was not a country. It was a continent comprised of countries. Egypt wasn't called Egypt, it was called Kemet. You know, the overwhelming foolishness that I get, you know, just it irks me. I'm trying to calm down and relax myself here because there are people, you know, and I tell people, I said, look, if you want to claim your heritage, so you're so proud, then learn the language. Don't keep your enslaver's name. People are so proud. I'm this, you know, this is my culture, this is my heritage. But your name is John. Your name is Harry. Your name is Lucy. Your name is Mary. Your name is Catherine. You're so proud of your African heritage. You're so proud of your native heritage. But yet the name that you have is your slave master's name. I tell people, don't come on here talking nonsense about how proud you are, but you do dishonor to your ancestors. You have no respect for them. Oh, I can't change my name. They won't accept me at my job. To hell with your job. Not saying you should forsake that which is important, being responsible and taking care of your family. But if your employer can't understand that this is just like they have religious tax exemption. You have churches, they don't have to pay taxes because of their religion. So you mean to tell me that you can't change your name because of retaliation from your employer? But then that's how you expose the racism. And they have lawsuits for that. People tired of people coming on, you know, telling me how proud they are of their heritage, but they haven't done anything. They haven't been a part of any group or any organization and done nothing in their communities. Don't speak out against nothing. The prophets have warned of these days and said that these things would happen. They're so proud, but haven't humbled themselves in the slightest to do anything that's representative or reminiscent of who they once were. Titles, they are important. Names, they are important, yes. But what's in the heart of the people and what's in the mind is as important as the title and the name. You cannot have one without the other. They must be congruent. I've been around in my days, traveled and seen much. I don't know it all. Any wise man would tell you that. Life is a constant learning lesson until you breathe your last breath. But before people speak certain things, they should look carefully in both directions. Before they make a judgment. I'm kind of glad that there are those type of people, because then the spirit of my ancestors are raised within me to combat this ignorance, because that's what it is. It's ignorance. You know, when I look and I hear the comments and referring to one of the gentlemen that came on and said that Africans and Native Americans are almost natural enemies. Oh my God! When this individual said this, an African American brother, he said that. I told him, show me your proof. Where are you basing this information off? I said, even in the Library of Congress, there is evidence of Africans and indigenous peoples fighting together. I said, Crispus Attucks was a byproduct of an African man and a Wampanoag Indian mother. And Crispus Attucks turned out to be someone who was somewhat confused. I might run into some controversy over this because of what he did at the start of the Revolutionary War. But you know, for someone to make comments like that, you know, there are mixed people here now. The mixed indigenous peoples here are not responsible for their existence. It's the people from both sides who came together because of hardship, heartache, and they saw, you know, that, hey, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Africans and Indians saw that the white man was their enemy. Look, you can't play with this. This is a fact in history. Does it exist today? Not in most circles, no. Because there were whites, blacks, and Indians who are merged together and who have come to a consensus to say, you know what? As bad as history is, the indigenous culture way of life, being that we are living here in North America in the indigenous way of life, is a good one. I'll accept it. I'll embrace it. Whether I'm adopted or I have some genetic blood, I'll accept it. That's beautiful. And what are they saying? I'll accept the indigenous way of life. They say they want to go back to a more morally, spiritually conscious way of living with one another and the earth. They want to return to a way that was more conducive to how we are supposed to interact and live with each other and the earth. This is important. I agree with that wholeheartedly, whether you're black or white. It's a healing process. Remember, we need that. And there are some Africans, Americans who want to go to the African culture. Yes, beautiful. Go back to your culture. We need that. Maybe it will heal some of the ills that we have here in North America called greed. I can't stress or emphasize this enough, that people are seriously, you know, messed up or with illness, emotionally and mentally. And this is a byproduct of what this society has produced. You know, the mixed in between, the so-called pure black and pure white, saying, oh, black people need to go back to their African culture. White people saying white people need to go back to their European culture. Whoa, look at the confusion here. You know, and whites saying that their people, their white people are sellouts. Black people are saying African Americans are sellouts. Let's see at the end of the day who the Creator favors. Because those who are talking out of both sides of their mouths aren't doing anything in terms of trying to better themselves culturally. I'm not talking about academically. I'm not talking about economically. You got people who are pushing themselves academically and they're making money, but that's all they're doing. That's why God said man can't live by bread alone. There has to be some moral interjection there. But if it's not there in the heart and in the mind, then how can one grow with just money? So then we're getting all of these negative comments from people to the byproduct of the two peoples mixed with indigenous peoples as well. You got Indians running around here who act more like white folks than anything else. And I'm talking about the white folks who initially came here to steal, pillage. Now, theft doesn't just mean that I'm killing you to steal what you have. Theft means that, I can steal from you through manipulation and ignorance of the law, whether it's the law, whether it's through manipulation through mathematics and banking, in advertising. So many people in debt. I know I'm one of them. As a result of fraudulent advertising or underwriting or writing that's in not blueprint. The words are microscopic. You got to get a magnifying glass to read the fine print. This is deception. Outright, overt deceptions. But the people who have been deceived don't know or understand this. So this correlates with the historical nature of what we have seen from white people who came from Europe. They came here with the intentions, the malicious intentions. Not all of them. It was more of the elites, governmental forces that came here, and some of its citizens that followed this practice when they saw the opportunity. So, wait, I think I got some gas here. Anyway, it's important that our perspectives remain clear on what it is that we're pursuing and why. And we must be clear about those who would wish to see, those who are trying to do some good in their lives, for those who mistake it for selling out your people. Man has a right to choose which direction he goes, long as it's a righteous and it's a good direction. If it's a good one, impede him not, impede her not. There are some indigenous peoples who are worried about African Americans taking their land. From who? Where? Where? This land is already stolen. And then not one African came over here and stole it. Point your fingers in the right direction. When there are still things going on. I saw a documentary the other day about what's going on in Australia with white folks and indigenous peoples, fighting, for land rights and other indigenous issues. And they were showing white folks throwing rocks. They were showing white folks throwing rocks at indigenous peoples because of their protests. You should have saw it. It was horrible. The Indians had to run. The Aboriginal Indians of Australia, they had to run in their cars. White folks throwing rocks at them along the sides. I mean, it was disgusting. I don't want to digress too much, for what the topic was. And, it's a commentary, but this topic, is dealing with the African American, Native American, paradigm. That's between both cultures and how they have affected one another in terms of their pure blood from African Americans, who are pure blood Africans, and pure blood natives. And then the mixture, the byproduct in between, and the pointing of fingers. It's a sad reality that there are some people who don't understand um, uh, what is the force behind people who are trying to establish themselves. Now, there are people who are saying, well, African Americans don't look like Native Americans, so how can they, absorb themselves into? Well, there are mixed indigenous groups coming together now. Yes, there are mixed natives who are incorporating themselves, who are overlooking the BS from other people who are talking nonsense, right? And they're accepting the various hues amongst themselves for one common cause. And that's the upliftment of the human being. Because through that vice, through the cultural incorporation of indigenous ways, we uplift ourselves as human beings. We make ourselves better. So while those people, whether they're African or white, want to sit there and complain and talk nonsense about people who have gravitated towards indigenous culture, what are they doing with their own lives? What have they done? What are they doing? If they're not doing nothing, they need to be quiet, and leave people alone who are trying to uplift themselves and do better with themselves. It serves you no purpose for yourselves personally, other than you dig a ditch for yourself. Because the people who are organizing and uniting later on down the line, in the fulfillment of prophecy, according to what has been spoken before, those who are left without a chair and remember you for what you have come out and spoke against that which was good for a person individually and collectively, because people who aspire to do better with themselves morally, spiritually, academically, culturally, the incorporation of the human being, I believe that God would favor them more so than one who all he does or she does is complain about what their people, have sold out. But yet you are engaged yourselves in reprehensible behaviors. You have made no effort to come out of a system that has destroyed you, but yet you want to point fingers. So I wanted to, basically just touch on this subject, because it hurt me to have to listen to some people, and I know I'm gonna have to go through this more so than I would like, but I have to address that. Wherever I come across it, because the ignorance is like poison, like a venomous snake spreads its poison. You bite one person, then go to the next, and that's how it spreads like wildfire. We'll have to attack it. If you are black and native, be proud. Be proud. Don't be biased. I know white people who are and claim that they're native, but being native is not just an outward appearance and an outward claim. It's the deeds of a man and a woman that make them native. Not just the culture things that we make. No. It's how you treat your brother with respect. You see your brother. How you doing, brother? How you doing, sister? How you doing, my clan's mother? It's the respect that we show towards one another. Whether you like that person doesn't matter. Or not, it doesn't matter. You show respect. There's plenty of people that we don't like on a daily basis, but we don't disrespect them. There's a difference here. I say, oh, that's being hypocritical. No, it's not. Because what are you saying? I don't like this person because of how they look. I don't like this person because of the way they look at me, or I don't like this person because of the things that they do in their life. That's no concern of yours. And now if someone disrespected you, then I can understand why you're saying. And it's not because of their culture or their background. It's because of what type of person that they are. But that doesn't give you the right. If no one has put their hands on you to hurt you, to steal from you, to rob from you, to lie and take from you, then there's no reason for you to be disrespectful. Whether they're black, whether they're Indian, whether they're white, it doesn't matter. Unless those things have been, because when it comes to being robbed, when it comes to being raped, when it comes to being lied to, those things are harder to get over. You can understand that you wouldn't respect someone who did those things to you. Of course not. That's why the white issue, whenever I bring that up, people want to say, oh, he's racist. No, I'm just talking about the things that there was a collective group of Europeans who came here with malicious intentions, and their intentions were what I just listed. And some of which who are still engaged in these activities today. So I have to bring up those white folks who are involved in those activities amongst the indigenous peoples here in the Western Hemisphere and throughout the world. They just happen to be white. And some darker peoples as well, whether they're indigenous, native, or whether they're African or black, wherever, or whatever they look like. So please, when you become a part of a cultural group, tribal group, nationality, embrace it with all your mind and your heart and your spirit and your passion. Embrace it with dignity, with a sense of, I could lose this any day, so I have to hold on to it. Embrace it. And don't just use it, as a badge that you can put on your lapel and take it off. You put on your lapel in the morning and take it off at night. Wear it 24 hours a day. Stand in it. Identify with it. Make it your own. A part of your complete being. And don't be ashamed. And don't be worried about people who are going to, discriminate against you if you change your name. I tell people my name is Chief Eagle Spirit all the time. I don't care. See, this is the true test of human beings. This is the true test. Some of the people who, they'll say behind closed doors who I am. And in the world, my name is Chris. My name is Mark. My name is John. What's wrong with those names? As indigenous peoples, those weren't our names. This is not hate. This is just truth. Well, what's wrong with the names we gave you? Ah. And when you present that, what's wrong with it? It's not who I am. Our names have definitions. They have meaning, substance. It describes the spirit, the nature of the human being. In metaphoric terms. And 99.99% of the time, it's a positive one. Why would you want to name your child, a destructive name like Damien? Just to give an example. You give your child a name that has no meaning. Our people, we dealt with that. We ascribe the name with the soul and the spirit of the human being as you develop. And it was supposed to be a positive thing. Because why would you want anything negative or destructive within your community? You know, we didn't, again, I'll say this, we didn't have pedophiles. You know, we didn't have a lot of the destructive behaviors that we have today in this society. We didn't have these things in our indigenous society. So what's the problem today? Where, you know, where are these things coming from? Well, we have been enslaved mentally, spiritually, culturally. We're not free. So that's why there are those who, you know, oh, I don't need to change my name. You know, oh, some of the Indians, their names are backwards. You're going to call yourself Indians, but then call your ancestors backwards. But, you know, name like running water. You know, oh, what kind of backwards name was that? You mutter this in the background, but then you tell people how proud you were of your Indian people. You didn't love your brothers and your ancestors. You know, you're a surface Indian, you know, or you're a surface African American because you're not studying anything, you're not reading, you're not learning anything. What are you looking for? Affirmation? From what? From your enslaver or someone who conquered you? You want to show them that you have acquired some level of freedom. That's on the surface. We are all still prisoners to some degree because we're not able to express our true selves, our cultural identities. We have been restricted. So anyway, I'm glad I had another opportunity to, you know, expand on, you know, some of the things of which, you know, press, you know, my spirit to speak at times, and the ancestors that speak. And in any video that I do here, nothing's written, straight from the heart. You know, so this is not something I plan. It just comes, and when it comes, I have to speak. This is another episode from Chief Eagle Spirit Dancing of the Cherokee Blackfeet Cultural Circle. And to that, I will say Wado, and I look forward to seeing my brothers and sisters again, and hope that you come away from this enlightened, encouraged, and strengthened. Stand strong, hold fast to that which is good, and maintain your course and direction for the upliftment and the restoration of our peoples. Wado, thank you, and Shalugi, you're welcome.